October 10th, 1991.
Brian Wilson, the genius behind the Beach Boys, who nearly destroyed himself with drugs.
I burned my brain out. My brain got burned out.
Now the Beach Boys say Wilson was saved only to become a victim of another kind.
Brian is the goose that laid the golden egg.
Tonight, the story of Brian Wilson and his therapist, a man who's been paid a fortune, who lives in Wilson's house, has moved in on his music, and has even cut himself into virtually every deal Wilson makes.
Members of your profession say, how could he do that? That is the very thing we are pledged not to do.
Diane Sawyer.
Good evening. For a generation now, the Beach Boys have been America's band. And their creator, Brian Wilson, our homegrown genius. Before his world collapsed from drugs and mental illness, Brian Wilson wrote harmonies so sweet, so complex and ahead of their time. Paul McCartney said once, he inspired the Beatles' best work. And now, next month, Brian Wilson's family is going to court to file something called a petition for conservatorship. They want the court to order Wilson's therapist manager out of his life and give them control over Brian and his money. Wilson opposes it, but the family says the sometimes vague, worried man you're about to meet isn't like the real Brian they know. And they're convinced that his problem now isn't illness, it's the cure.
We may never be that innocent again. The way we were when a sweet-faced boy named Brian Wilson and his Beach Boys sang our coming-of-age fantasies. The Beach Boys were family from the right cousin Mike Love, Brian, his brother Carl, and best friend Al Jardine, and on the drums, another brother, Dennis.
It didn't matter that Dennis Wilson was the only one who could actually surf. The Beach Boys were riding a wave of exuberance, optimism in the country, all the way to hit after hit. Over the years, they would sell about 100 million records. The only problem was the kid who had been making all that music felt he was going under. In 1964, just 2 years after the first big record contract, Brian Wilson had a nervous breakdown.
The glasses went to fire, rose the fullness of the wine, the dim last toast.
At 22, he was too young and too fragile for the pressure of writing, producing, performing. And it was too easy to turn to drugs. Pot, LSD, uppers, cocaine, even heroin.
A broken man too tough to cry.
I burned my brain out. My brain got burned out, and nothing left of my brain, you know.
You really think
I turned into a vegetable over drugs, yeah. A lot of brain damage. Real lot of brain damage. And every day of my life I pay a little dues for because of the drugs I took.
By 1981, he had ballooned to over 300 pounds. He refused to shower and hid in his bed for 2 years.
What were you afraid of?
I was afraid that the devil came in the form of other people that were competing with me, that had ideas of killing me and getting rid of me.
And you thought it was everywhere, in the shower head?
Yes, the shower head. Everywhere I looked, I'd say, yeah, the devil's after me.
Does it come back sometimes?
Yeah, it does. It comes back to haunt me every, maybe 3 weeks to a month.
Brian Wilson is a perfect example of the fact that in my field, I'm an artist.
This man says he's the reason Brian Wilson functions today at all. In 1983, at the family's request, Dr. Eugene Landy placed Wilson under therapy. His highly unorthodox therapy, a kind of boot camp, 24-hour supervision, diet control, exercise. He forced Wilson to confront the agony of his childhood, memories of a hectoring, abusive father.
He beat the hell out of me. All the time. He hurt me deeply.
Whatever Landy's method, his program worked. Brian Wilson before, Brian Wilson after.
Did Dr. Landy save your life?
Absolutely. Yes, he did.
But success had a price, an astronomical price. The bills came in, $50,000 for vitamins, $25,000 for Landy's out-of-pocket expenses for 4 days in Hawaii. At one point, Landy's fees and extra charges were running well over $1 million a year. To offset Landy's fees, the Beach Boys donated an extra concert a month.
I think Landy thinks that Brian is the goose that laid the golden egg.
Lead singer Mike Love, who co-wrote a lot of hits with Brian Wilson, back before Landy came along.
He said he'd be there a year to year and a half. Well, when it got to be about 5 years, we realized that he has no intention of ever leaving Brian on his own.
It's now 9 years, and the family says the entire time, the sweet and loving Brian they knew has been isolated, virtually held a prisoner by Landy, and poisoned against them.
I find them to be people that are very sick. I mean, you know, I have some pity for them.
They have said that they think you're in a kind of prison.
Well, life is a prison in itself. Not just the Dr. Dr. Landy program, but everybody has to have a little imprisonment in order to understand that you know, that this is where we are. I mean, just, you know.
We saw where Brian Wilson has been all these years, a world where he can almost never see outsiders alone.
1, 2, 3.
When he does see other people, Landy or one of his hand-picked aides is almost always watching. Here's one of them recording us the entire time on videotape. And it's not just us. It happened to the Beach Boys, too.
We don't have access to him without Landy's supervision. Videotaping, recording.
Everything has gone to hell between me and the Beach Boys. Totally gone to hell.
When other old friends tried to call, they couldn't get through the wall put up by Landy either. Dean Torrance of the group Jan and Dean.
I tried maybe 8, 10, 15 times.
Dean ever call you?
No.
Not in all these years.
We have no ongoing relationship. No.
Your daughters? Would you like to see your daughters?
Yeah. I think my daughters are kind of off on a career.
You're in love, that's the way. It's your...
Wendy Wilson and Carney Wilson now have 3 #1 records of their own, as 2/3 of the group Wilson Phillips. They told us how much they love their father and that they miss him, but they have been shut out too.
You proud of them?
I'm very proud of my daughters. I think my daughters are probably 2 of the most special girls ever created.
Why don't you see them?
Why don't I see them? Well, gosh, you know, that's a hard question. I can't answer that question. I'm guilty for not being a good father. I was a druggie when I should have been a father.
Can you go tell them that?
Well, I could.
Think you might?
No, I don't say I could. I'm going to. I've been waiting for the right time to call him. That's what it is, you know.
So far, his daughters have only been allowed to see him alone, 1 hour each, in the past 9 years.
He didn't want to see the children. The family beats him up all the time. The daughters especially.
The family says you've screened his phone calls for 9 years now.
Okay, I screened his phone calls for a year and a half.
They say you screened it for
Well, I
longer
know what they
than
say,
that.
but I'm telling you, I screened his phone calls for a year and a half because when you treat drug addicts, the first thing you do is you change their environment.
This woman who asked not to be identified is a former Landy employee who says Landy is lying.
I was told that if Audrey, his mother, called, Brian was not allowed to take any calls.
She worked for Landy not in that first year, but within the last 2 years.
There was, in the time that I was there, not a single phone call that I was ever allowed to put through to Brian.
Screened calls, I've never heard of that before in my life. I don't know. Screened calls, there's no screened calls.
But they say you have systematically ensured that none of them can get to him.
That's crazy.
He has had a number of lawyers who are all able to get him.
John Mason was
Mason was a major lawyer that got him out of the trust.
And he could always get him?
Mason got him ongoingly.
I could not reach Brian Wilson on the telephone in the entire 5 years that I represented him.
John Mason says he resigned 5 months ago after Brian Wilson, out of Landy's earshot, complained of having no freedom.
See if you can get Brian on the phone, will you?
Mason also raised questions about another kind of Landy control. He told us about a Beach Boys meeting last January. He says when Brian Wilson disagreed with Dr. Landy, Landy called a break, and Brian Wilson was given pills.
We went back in the meeting, and Brian's eyes were rolled up behind his eyelids, and he couldn't communicate anymore.
2 other participants in that meeting have supported Mason's story, though Landy denies it and says Wilson's medication is controlled by a licensed psychiatrist.
I do not give drugs to Brian.
Now they've got me on the medicine that keeps me in an even place, so I don't go woo out of control high or whoa down low. You know what I mean?
I think it's time for someone who has been on the inside of Brian Wilson's life to stand up and try to put an end to this terrible relationship.
You think Eugene Landy has completely brainwashed Brian Wilson?
Yes, I do.
Does brainwashing mean conditioning a person's mind to act and react in a certain way to things?
Yes, it means taking control of it so that the person believes what you tell them to believe.
So in other words, when you're brainwashing to believing something.
Yeah, believing something about the world.
Oh, I see. Okay, good. Great. Yeah, no. There has been none of that. No.
I have not, quote, brainwashed him, which is what they say.
But in 1988, the authorities in charge of Landy's psychology license had their own say about the doctor. They investigated not just the Wilson case, but a charge of patient rape, which Landy had settled out of court. An accusation of freebasing cocaine. Landy denied it. Finally, in a plea bargain, Landy agreed to surrender his license, pleading guilty to 1 count of illegally giving prescription medicine to Brian Wilson. So Landy could no longer officially be Wilson's therapist. He found another job. He called it life manager.
He became Wilson's business partner in a company called Brains and Genius.
Brains is Brian, the A and the I reversed, and genius is obvious.
We're told Landy's new incarnation pays as well as his last, that he gets $35,000 a month plus extra fees. Brian Wilson has a new autobiography out this week. Landy's take of the profits, the same as Wilson. And if the book becomes a movie, Landy will get a lot of money for that too. And it doesn't stop there. When Wilson got a yellow Corvette for doing a Chevrolet commercial, Landy got one too. When Wilson got an upright piano, Landy got a baby grand. Meanwhile, Brian Wilson lives in a rented house. The one he owns is being used by Dr. Landy, who also arranged for Brian to pay $500,000 to renovate it.
They think that Dr. Landy takes financial advantage of you.
Financial advantage?
That he's getting rich off of you.
Well, who says that? How does anybody think that?
Members of your family.
Is that based on fact? Is that information that's factual, or is it just a suspicion?
Do you know how much you're paying Dr. Landy?
You mean per
year?
I wish not to tell that.
And the family says the money isn't all.
Rainbow eyes, red, yellow, blue.
These are Landy's lyrics from his second album with Wilson. The album has been rejected by Warner Records. And so the family says the doctor who was supposed to rescue a Beach Boy has now become a parody of a Beach Boy himself, a flagrant violation of his profession's code of ethics.
Brian had a lot to teach me. I'll tell you what it was.
Psychologists say it's unconscionable to be in a dual, triple, quadruple relationship with a client that they don't know whether you were his doctor or his backup singer, his lyricist or his therapist.
I don't disagree with that. Brian Wilson was not a traditional therapy.
That's for sure. We found his original contract, showing early on the doctor was positioned to reap financial benefit from co-writing music with a vulnerable patient.
But Dr. Landy, there is a rule against that. It's against the code of your profession.
It's a rule that I can't explain it to you. It's
the code of your profession.
Yes, I don't disagree with that. I not only have accepted that, I know that.
And you violated it.
But I didn't do it.
But you were preparing to take a piece of a business transaction with your patient.
Yes. Negotiated by his lawyers, my lawyers, Brother Records lawyers, the manager, and everybody.
This is between you and the ethics of your profession. It has nothing to do with all the people who negotiated it.
What you're saying is valid. In this whole situation, I never hurt Brian. I never intended in any way to do anything unethical.
I may not always love you.
On November 18th, the California Superior Court will decide for itself about Dr. Eugene Landy and Brian Wilson.
You're so sure about it, and God only knows what I'd be without you.
We should point out that next month the court will also consider whether the family can give Brian the help he needs. As Landy points out, Brian's brother Dennis Wilson died in an alcohol-related accident in 1983. By the way, after our interview with Dr. Landy, we found documents from two doctors saying for 6 months in the mid-'80s, Landy himself was disabled by psychiatric problems. I asked Dr. Landy to discuss this with us on camera, and he declined. And we also found a source who said that she had seen a draft will for Brian Wilson, a draft which gave Eugene Landy the bulk of everything Wilson has.